slides that I will be referring to during the course of the show, and there'll be some visual imagery there to go along with the concepts and ideas that I'll be talking about. So, image number one there, of course, is the poster for the Streetwise Spirituality Seminar coming up in St. Louis. Feel free to disseminate that to whoever you want, post it on social network sites. It's there to be shared. Image number two, what I'm going to get into tonight is this polarizing dialectic that goes on. It's what you might call the Hegelian dialectic in action. And again, the Hegelian dialectic is named after the philosopher Friedrich Hegel. Hegel was not an evil individual in and of himself. The Hegelian dialectic is actually about synthesis between two seemingly polarizing opposites to present a choice that often assures some sort of an outcome. Whether that outcome is really contrived and or whether I should say that outcome is like kind of contrived, it's predetermined, but it could be for a positive purpose. The Hegelian dialectic does not have to be for manipulation, deceit, deception, and control. Okay, so Hegel was using it as a mechanism of basically getting people to arrive at a conclusion by way of choosing between things, which is what dialectic simply means, by way of choice. When we break down the word in its etymology, dia in Latin means, in Greek means through or by way of, and lectus in Latin means choice. So it simply means by way of choice. But what I'm talking about insofar as dialectics go here is dialectics which polarize people, which get people to fight amongst each other, which creates a divide and conquer strategy that the powers that should not be, that the sorcerers for consciousness, that the mind controllers use to divide people against each other and therefore make them easier to rule over. So this dialectic that I'm going to get into today, which I call the polarizing dialectics or the polarization paradigms, okay, they are in regard to where we came from. And really, they're in regard to where everything comes from. The whole idea of what drives creation, and specifically what has driven human beings to get to the condition and the position that we are in today. Okay, so it's about creation and it's about human origins. And these two polarizing dialectics, one of them works through a left brain form of imbalance, and the other works through a right brain form of imbalance. And again, since day number one on this show, I have been talking about the imbalances in the masculine or feminine side of the personality. And these are reflected through imbalances through the left and right brain hemispheres in the human physiology. So, and again, these aren't hard or fast rules when it comes to it's all just left brain and the left brain only does these things. Of course, human neuroscience is more complicated than that, and you can't just say all of these functions only interact in the left brain hemisphere and there's no activity going on in the right brain hemisphere when we're engaged in those functions. Of course, that's not what this overall model for left and right brain qualities and interactions means, okay? People who are hearing it in that level of reductionism and simplicity aren't understanding the generality that is being made here when it comes to left brain forms of interaction with consciousness and right brain forms of interactions with consciousness. We have to be a little bit more mature and open-minded about that and understand that this is a general model and it's not something that 100% works that way all times and places, okay? Passio. I was talking about before the break, I was talking about the two overarching polarizing paradigms when it comes to human origins and creation. And the forces that drive creation. So, again, one of these is an extremely left-brained imbalanced worldview, and one is an extremely right-brained imbalanced worldview. And I was talking about there are no hard and fast rules when it comes to the interactions of the left and right brain. Of course, every modality of thinking is going to involve some crossover between these two hemispheres, but I'm talking in general terms that largely the left brain is used when it comes to things like scientific thought, linear thinking, time-bound awareness, analytical breakdowns of things, math, verbal skills, etc. Okay, and largely the right brain is involved when we're talking about intuitive thinking, non-time-bound awareness, seeing the big picture, heuristic type thinking. Creativity, of course, nurturing, compassion, etc. Okay, so one is the masculine part of the brain, that being the left brain hemisphere. One is the feminine side of the brain and personality, largely driven by the right brain hemisphere. So let's look at the first polarization dialectic involved in human origins. And again, this is all a lead-in to discussing the answer to the question, where did humanity really come from? And what created the current human condition as it exists right now? Because most people come down on one of the two sides of this aisle, of this divide that I'm going to be explaining here tonight. Almost everybody. There's so few that don't fit into one of these two Hegelian dialectical polarization paradigms, okay, that you can practically count them on one hand. Very, very few people don't buy into one of these two paradigms or another. And you know what? It's something that the universe, I was starting to say this a couple of weeks ago, the universe has almost been telling me, this is what you need to hammer on. This is what you need to absolutely bring the sledgehammer down upon. Because this is what's keeping people totally trapped in a mind-controlled state. Their belief on how does a human being arrive at the condition that we have arrived in right now. Almost everybody has this so completely wrong, incorrect, believe in their position from a complete state of imbalance, not from looking at any facts, okay, from believing in a religion, whether that religion be traditionalist religion type thinking, of any given cultural religion, or whether it be from the religion called scientism, which is also a religion. It's a religion where your priest class is the guys in the white lab coats in the laboratories and research facilities who are telling you exactly how reality is, and you're buying into it wholesale and eating it up with a spoon and a straw. And what's leading to all of their conclusions isn't truth. It isn't real research. It isn't real science. It's what did the government grant money allow us to do this week? What did Big Daddy say we were approved and given funding to do? Because he wants the outcome to be skewed in that direction. That's what science is in the modern day. And I've been hammering on this on interviews lately. And I'm telling you folks, if you don't think that's exactly how so-called science is done today, you are kidding yourself. Okay, I worked in one of the premier research facilities for an Ivy League university. Okay, the University of Pennsylvania. I worked in their medical research facilities, supporting their laboratories in departments that researched cancer, specifically blood cancers, in their department that researched heart diseases. And I supported computers in those laboratories for years. And I'm telling you exactly how their science is done. They beg the money for government on a yearly basis. They're not interested in looking for anything that's really going to radically transform the world. And largely they're involved in agendas that are connected to government, that advance things like eugenics. And I'm telling you folks, it's an animal sacrifice factory for 24 hours a day around the clock. Non-stop. Not really doing anything with those lives except snuffing them out too. And I'm telling you, if I ever wanted to release photos that I have from what goes on inside those facilities, I'm telling you it would bring a hailstorm down upon people. Maybe I should do it one day. I'm telling you, people have no idea what passes off as science at all. At all. And how it's completely driven by money and the financial institutions and totally directed by psychopaths in government They want the outcome of science to be how they want it to be, not how the truth is. They could give a damn about truth. I'll tell you a conversation I actually overheard just while I'm giving this anecdote, to show people that science, so-called science, what I call scientism, doesn't give a damn about trying to find a cure for a thing. I was in a laboratory in the hematology oncology department working on a computer on the other side of a cubicle, and I was unable not to overhear a conversation that was going on between one of the heads of the department and one of the researchers who had just been hired and brought on board, and was in this cubicle in this laboratory doing some research on, I guess, gene work, sequencing work or whatever. And she was, I guess, doing some research into certain substances that she was working with and how they may have affected animals or animal tissue. And she said to one of the heads of the department, "This is a really encouraging result, don't you think?" Something to the effect, she said something to the effect that if we keep getting results like this, I mean, maybe this might at some time in the future lead to a cure for this type of blood cancer. And when you hear somebody saying that, you would think that the reaction on the other side of this department head, who is basically, he's the main researcher of this entire department that I was supporting, would be very encouraged and want to know more about it. Instead, it was as if she just said, "I'm going to kill both of your children and eat them," with a little bit of hot sauce on the side. I mean, you might have thought she said that to this guy, because he whipped his head around and said, "Don't ever let me hear you say that word again in my presence. Don't ever let me hear you say that word again in my presence." And what was the word he was talking about? Cure. Cure. She dared to utter the word cure in this research department. Okay? And what he meant by that is, if you find a cure for anything, there goes our gravy train. He said, he didn't say it like that, of course. I'm saying that that's exactly what he meant. But he said to her, "We don't look for cures. We look for treatments to be able to mitigate diseases. We are not here to try to find a cure. So don't ever let me hear you say that that's what you're doing or trying to look for or trying to prop yourself up on that pedestal." He said this directly to this new researcher who had just been hired. Okay, now that is how modern science is done, ladies and gentlemen. And if you don't think so, you are a fool. A fool. Because that's what scientism is all about. It's about the money. It's about the tenure. It's about just keeping the process going year in and year out. So I have my job, my job, and it's set and it's secure. They're not interested in overturning the entrenched paradigm of how science is done. They're not interested in finding the cure for a damn thing. All right? So let's look at this extreme chronic left brain imbalance and the paradigm that basically works through it. The Darwinian quote-unquote evolution paradigm. Why do I have evolution in quotes there? Okay? What am I saying by putting that in quotes? I'm trying to make people understand it's not actual evolution. I looked at this 2 weeks ago when we broke down the difference between evolution in occult terms, or in terms that take consciousness into consideration, versus